Hey guys, it is me, the former film student, back today with another episode of 31 Nights, 31 Frights. We are on episode 11 today. In episode 10, we discussed one of my favorite guilty pleasure films, that being Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives. So if you haven't checked out that video, make sure to go check it out. It's a pretty fun video. It's a little shorter, and I wasn't able to film myself in it because I just was running low on time. So it's just my audio track on top of some clips from the film. But yeah, it's still a good time, so go check that out. But that being said, we are continuing a trend of movies that I find really entertaining with 2011's Cabin in the Woods. So yeah, as I mentioned, Cabin in the Woods was released in 2011. It is directed by Drew Goddard and produced by Joss Whedon, who you may know as the director of the first two Avengers films. He also came in and did the reshoots of 2017's Justice League, and he's also very famous for creating the Buffy the Vampire Slayer show. Guys, I love this movie. Not only is this one of my favorite horror films of all time, this is just one of my favorite movies, period. I find so much entertainment in this film. I think Drew Goddard did such a wonderful job directing this movie. I think the performances are all really solid. I think the cinematography is more than competent. The soundtrack is pretty good. The special effects work is actually really great. But this movie is not simply just like a technical feat. It's not a movie that is incredibly well made like The Exorcist or Halloween or The Witch or something of like that sorts. It's not like that. The real star of this movie is the script. This script is absolutely genius. It's brilliant. It's one of the smartest horror scripts I have ever seen because not only is it just a really well-written film, but very similar to the film Scream, which I've talked about on this series so far, it really sets out to sort of parody and poke fun at films that it was heavily influenced by. Whereas Scream is poking fun at slashers, Cabin in the Woods is obviously poking fun at movies like The Evil Dead and other films of that variety. And I will be spoiling a little bit of the premise. I'm not going to get into heavy details with this film. I'm not going to be like spoiling anything too heavy. I'm just going to be talking a little bit about the premise of the film. So if you haven't seen it, I cannot recommend this movie enough. Go watch this movie. I believe it's on Hulu right now, so stop the video, go watch it, come back, watch the rest of the video. But yeah, so I'm not going to be spoiling anything crazy. I just want to talk a little bit about the plot and why I think it's so brilliant. I'm going to give you guys a spoiler warning in 3, 2, 1. Alright, so if you guys are still here, I assume you've seen the film already, or you just don't care about spoilers. Anyway, if you've seen the film, the plot of the film basically boils down to a group of college students going to a cabin in the woods, go figure, and then chaos sort of ensues, but all of the chaos that happens, all of the horrific things that happen to these college kids is all orchestrated by a government-run facility. And at the beginning of the film, you don't really know why the government is doing this sort of thing. You're not really sure the purpose behind it, but as the film sort of progresses, you start to understand more and more why things are happening the way they are and the necessary reason that this sort of event is happening. And what I really love is not only is this film really fun and entertaining, it's very comedic at times, but it's almost darkly comedic because when you really think about some of the stuff that's happening in this film, and they even showcase it with some of the government facility workers, and they sort of try to play things off as a joke and like it doesn't really bother them, but as the film, again, progresses, you start to see that a lot of the stuff that they're doing really does take an emotional toll on them, and they sort of have to make a joke out of it so that it doesn't really get the best of them. And I think that is such an interesting concept to run with because I feel like this movie could have easily just been a generic parody film that sets out to just, you know, make fun of movies like this, but I think it's really interesting that you take these characters, these government characters, and they could have easily just made everything a joke and just laughed about it and not really cared what happened to these college kids. But I think it's incredibly interesting that they sort of gave them some depth and showed that what they're doing to these kids and that they have to repeatedly do something like this really takes a toll on them and really affects them emotionally and mentally, psychologically. So yeah, I really think that was a really smart addition to the film. But yeah, there's just so many brilliant parts in this film. You know, one of the things that I think people always poke fun at horror films for is the decision making on the character's part, especially, you know, scenarios where they're like, oh, we should split up, and it's clear like, no, you should clearly stick together. And they even have a scene in this film where the characters are like, oh yeah, we should stick together, and then they release this gas into the air that makes them change their mind, and it's sort of silly, but it's really funny. And it's a real clever way to sort of poke fun at all of the horror films that have come out, where the characters really do make illogical decisions. And it's just, again, a really clever, really well-written script that does a lot of different things to sort of parody, poke fun at films that it was clearly heavily inspired by. The last thing that I do want to talk about in this film is the final 15 to 20 minutes. The final 15 to 20 minutes of this film are some of my favorite in any film ever. About halfway through the film, if you've seen a lot of movies like I have, you start to sort of understand what's going to happen in a film. You start to sort of put things together, you think you know where things are going, and in most horror films, even the best ones, it's pretty easy to see like how the film's going to end. And I'm not saying that in a pretentious, all-knowing, like I'm just so much smarter than the movie makers, but if you watch enough movies, a lot of them follow a similar formula, and you think that, you know, what you've seen before is going to happen again. Yeah, not this movie. This movie gets nuts real fast. It goes from like an intensity level of 6, maybe 7, to a hard 10, possibly breaking the scale to an 11, pretty much at the snap of a finger. You hit a moment in the film where shit just hits the fan and it goes absolutely crazy, and my God, is it entertaining. It is one of the most entertaining, one of the most creative, and just thrilling final 15 to 20 minutes of a film I have ever seen. If you guys have seen this film and you've seen the ending, you know exactly what I'm talking about. This movie goes in directions that you just do not think it's going to go in. You're basically at one point strapped into a roller coaster that is this movie, and you can't get off, and you're just going to have to let it take you where it's going to take you, and you either go with it and you love it, or you don't really enjoy it, but you still gotta go with it. And I don't want to say too much. I don't want to give too much away in case those of you who stayed in anyway. Again, please watch this movie. I absolutely love this movie. Again, it's on Hulu. I think it's streaming on Hulu. I'm not 100% certain, but I think when I was, you know, looking it up on Google, I think that's where it's streaming right now. But if not, rent it for like $3.99 somewhere. You will have a blast watching this movie. If you don't like it, I do apologize, but I just don't see how someone wouldn't like this movie. I recommend this movie to horror fans, to people that aren't into horror movies, if I'm trying to like get them into them. Like, this is a perfect movie that if you're not really into horror films because A, you think the characters are stupid and the plots are stupid, this has a reasoning for all of that, and it has a really clever script. If you're someone who just doesn't like being scared, I don't find this movie all that scary. It's more fun and entertaining. It's just a really, really great movie. I will say there is one flaw that I really dislike, and it's not even a huge flaw. It's just a minor critique that happens at the beginning of the film. Essentially, something happens in the film that sort of spoils something that happens later on. And I think if you've seen the film, you know what I'm talking about. It's just a very quick thing that happens that if it wouldn't have happened, it would have had a lot more tension in a scene later on in the film. But other than that, I really, really love this movie. There is a lot I could say about it. I could do a whole video essay, and maybe I will, but for the time being, you guys will just have to be okay with just this review. So that is all I'm going to say for today. Have you seen Cabin in the Woods? If you have, let me know in the comments down below your thoughts on it. Do you love it? Do you hate it? If you do go watch this movie based off my recommendation and you hate it, again, I do apologize. But I really love this movie. It's one of my all-time favorites, not just horror movies, but just movies in general. It is such a blast from start to finish, especially the last act of the movie. So that is it for today. As always, if you liked the video, make sure to click the like button, subscribe to me if you'd like to hear more from me, click the little bell notification so that you do get notified when I post new videos, and I will see you guys on the next episode.